BOYLE Sports.
Hello and welcome back to On the Wire for our Tingle Creek preview. We've got a fantastic episode in store with some top panellists as always, as we look forward to the Grade One action at Sandown before having a peer at some of the Irish racing later in the show. Certainly one to be interested in, certainly one to be intrigued by. We'll get into the show. Our sponsors, BOYLE Sports, are always trying to make your job as a punter easier. And if you're a new customer in Ireland with BOYLE Sports, you can get up to €70 worth of free bets. If you bet €10, you are entitled to €70 worth of free bets. Terms and conditions apply. Look in the description down below to avail of a brilliant sign-up offer. Delighted to be joined, as always, by Dan Overall, Gavin Lynch and Mark Boylan. We were looking for the best around in racing to give us the best opinions, and they weren't available. So this is the crew we have alongside ourselves. We've had a few smashing weekends of racing. Mark, Ferryhouse last weekend, even looking over to Newbury, Newcastle. There's just been loads of good stuff on and plenty of really informative racing.
Yeah, and look, you often say you need big fields, you like big fields, but you didn't need big fields for big drama last weekend. In fairness, 5 in a fight and fifth, and it was carnage everywhere. 6 in a Hatton's Grace, and you still got a bucket of drama too. So look, you could be here till the cows come home talking about it. But one kind of note that I thought that might have flown slightly under the radar: Jack Kennedy. He's turned 26. He's got 51 Grade Ones after a Grade One double on Sunday. To me, for a guy that's been through everything he's been through, and even last weekend or last year, this weekend, everything he was through. Yeah, hats off to him. And you never know. I know the talk of the Jockeys Championship here has been very much Contownend, Real and Darrow O'Keefe. Jack is right in the middle of them at the moment, and the way Gordon Elliott's are firing everywhere, whether it be Ayr or Ferryhouse or Navan. Yeah, I wouldn't discount a big bold bid from him.
Yeah, very much so. Gavin, we went into the weekend, I suppose, looking for clues from a champion hurdle perspective, and after the fighting fifth, we've been left with more questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we were all looking forward to which of the three were going to win, but as often can be the case, none of them won. Golden Ace, fair play to her. She gets no credit. She won a Mayor's Novice hurdle when the other two were watching each other, and then she wins a champion hurdle when Stefan fell, and then she wins here when they fall again. So she's a really good, lovely mare. But yeah, as you say, the race left us with more questions than answers. And I just hope your cold clears up there, Andrew. You sound a bit croaky there today, so I just hope you can get some medicine into you and that you'll be all right.
Are you off the bridle, Andrew? Never
seen Put you away big time there.
Wouldn't possibly be me off the bridle. I couldn't possibly say anything of anything to agree with that. Wouldn't want to perjure myself in any type of information. Dan, I know for a fact, though, as a man that loves the staying hurdle division, I'm sure seeing Tiupo win again. We were having a friendly spar on Sunday between how good and how merited Tiupo's kind of championship status is. But it was a good race, to be fair. It was a decent spectacle, and alongside the Newbury race over 3 miles, there's plenty to ponder in that division.
I wouldn't necessarily call it a friendly spar. It was cutthroat stuff for about an hour, I'd say, you and me going at it there. I generally couldn't believe when they were analysing the race on TV that I heard Ballyburn 9-4 for the Stayers hurdle. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He licked the ground for 2 miles, and he still, in my book, has an awful lot to prove in terms of actual proper out-and-out 3 miler, particularly at Cheltenham. It's a fascinating race. So I'd definitely say Tiupo was the more solid proposition, but there's still plenty lurking in there. Irish Point yet to come out. Honesty Policy, Impostoires and Improver. So it's starting to develop that picture, but I couldn't have Ballyburn at 9-4 in a fit for the Stayers.
Our sponsors, BOYLE Sports, are also giving out sign-up offers for our British-based customers. If you bet £10, you're entitled to £40 worth of free bets. Bet 10 to get 40. Terms and conditions apply. You can look down in the description down below to avail of a brilliant sign-up offer. But the big action this weekend comes from Sandown. 2 Grade Ones on Saturday in the Henry VIII Novices Chase and the Tingle Creek, alongside a couple of really good competitive handicaps as well. We'll be covering the London National before having a little bit of a look at Navan this weekend. Mark, I suppose we'll start with the Henry VIII Novices Chase. this looks a fascinating race. It's small on entries at the moment, but Lulamba in there. Sam Thomas has got two pretty nice young horses in there as well. Looks like it's shaping up into a pretty trappy little race.
I think so, yeah. I suppose when we were in that prism of looking at the chase and debutants, I probably would have had Lulamba behind Final Demand and behind Kopek de Boer, but it was still very, very solid. Like, you're probably judging them off outstanding novices. I think this season we are blessed with like a Romeo Coolio in the mix as well. In other years, you could see Romeo Coolio going off a Mighty Potter type price in a Grade One at Cheltenham. But we've got the two options now. It does reduce it back. Maybe he's more of a 2.5 horse than a 2 miler out and out, but I think this weekend it's going to be fine. Interesting McGround this weekend, Andrew thought as well, because there was a big forecast for plenty of rain early in the week. But just looking at the forecast in the morning before we recorded here, there's further bands of rain to come Thursday, but nothing particularly heavy at this stage, they say. So just with a view to if you're interpreting the Tingle Creek with Jonbon or Lulamba here, I think he's pretty versatile, Lulamba. I wouldn't be overly concerned, but just weighing up the picture, I think it is going to be pretty decent conditions. Lump sum, if you're looking at him as your main market rival, I thought he was fine at Uttoxeter. Like, in terms of hurdle ratings, he does stack up very well, and I'm always a little bit wary of the 4-year-old hurdlers from the previous season needing to go and prove themselves to a good level as senior representatives. But lump sum, I thought he had an inclination to get in a little bit tight. I didn't think he was crazy brave. He didn't have to be on the day. But I thought the leader, Jax Jr., taking him around everywhere, was making lengths at fences. I thought lump sum was more kind of considerate. At Sandown, if he was to get tight to 1, I just wouldn't like to see him having to go chase it on the back foot, because we didn't get to see that element of his game first time up at Uttoxeter. Lulamba, I thought we got to see a few different elements of how he'd approach a fence. He could be sent long, he could get in tight. So look, I think at the prices, I'd love to be coming out with a bit more value, but I would find it hard to take him on. Probably a no-bet race on the weekend when you're weighing up this amount of racing, but I'd have him as the likeliest winner. Be aware, fine, don't know if that form of 2nd of July flower, is that really good enough to stick you in an Arca picture? It would need to be more than that for me when you're looking at the form required. You have Lulamba in here at 4-1 for an Arkle. He's 8-11 to win this. I think, if you are a big fan of him, I think it's easier to take the 8-11 now than the 4s, but I just believe there's plenty of depth to that 2-mile picture at the moment, and I'd like him to go and prove it to me that he is every bit as good as he looked.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair assessment. Dan, I suppose people were pretty quick to crab Lulamba in terms of this idea that he must go out and trip. You would think based on class alone here, he'd have a huge chance. Interesting with the Sam Thomas duo, as Mark touched on lump sum there, but you could make a strong case that Steel Ally certainly looked the more natural on his chase debut.
Yeah, and I think they've always admitted that lump sum isn't obviously the scopiest of horses. I think he'll achieve a high level over fences, but maybe won't get to the absolute top. But you'd be the man for the Sam Thomas information, Andrew. Do you have a bit of an inside line on which one's going to go? Because I think they're going to be pretty determined to split them both up.
Yeah, well, I think that's the plan. I think if it was down to Sam Thomas, he'd probably roll the dice with the two of them, to be honest. But you can see why in the situation he's in, working for Di Walters. Di wants to keep these horses apart, which you can understand why. But I do agree with Mark. I just thought lump sum class got him through chase debut. As for Steel Ally, I think they've always had in their mind just looks a complete natural. And it wouldn't surprise me as much as one was the better hurdler than the other, that might be flipped over fences.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I guess the tactical angle is going to be interesting here as well, because you look at the potential rivals to Lulamba, and you're looking at all horses who are admittedly in small fields, but all basically made all for the most part, bar maybe lump sum, who sat behind Jax Jr. Obviously, Be Aware was very prominent at Cheltenham last time, went from the front there. Aunalam nearly spread eagled the field at Cheltenham as well. He's a very keen going type. 6 Mile Bridge as well, went forward over further. So there's going to be an awful lot of pace on here. And I think Lulamba will be held in good stead by what happened last time out at Exeter, because he had Tripoli, Fire and Salva that day go a real strong early pace. I think the 95% finishing speed, which kind of shows you what they did in the early sectionals there. And there were 4 fences omitted down the back, which I think helped lead to that, because it meant they got racing a bit earlier than perhaps usual. But the fact he was able to set off that kind of strong early pace, jumped adequately. I don't think he's ever going to be a really extravagant jumper of a fence, but he was clever when he needed to be, and he could find a stride when he needed to be as well. That's going to hold him in good stead in a race that may also be ran at a strong tempo. And ultimately, at this stage of the season, as a 4-year-old getting £6, yeah, it's probably hard to see him beaten if his jumping holds up. And I think the race will pan out in his favour.
Yeah, you can understand that. Gavin, I suppose he's 8-11. It's not a crazy price, but I suppose there's an argument for some people that they would think 8-11 might be a backable price.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think he's beatable. I think his jumping in Exeter was very, very safe. as you say, Dan, 4 fences were taken out. The one thing you got to do in Sandown, especially down the back straight, is you got to jump really well. There's a lot of pace on. Some of the others here jump fantastically. The 2 Sam Tom horses are very good. Dan's ran well at Cheltenham, as did Alan Lamb previously. But I just think he's ranging between 8 to 11, 4 to 7. I suppose bookmakers, when they're pricing up a race, they're very wary of them. Maybe only end up with 3 or 4 in it. It'd be interesting, as he said, if both the Sam Thomases run. But if they all run, if all 6 go to post, I think Lulamba's jumping might just come under a lot of pressure at that course, and I think he's opposable.
Our sponsors, BOYLE Sports, are also giving away best odds guaranteed on all singles and multiples. You can get best odds guaranteed at BOYLE Sports. What's not to like? The Tingle Creek obviously is for the seniors, I suppose, over 2 miles, and it's an interesting division at the moment. Jonbon for so long has kind of held the candle over 2 miles, domestic grade ones, but he certainly didn't look himself when well beaten in the Schlur chase by Lotus Sud, and Il Etait Temps, who beat him at Sandown at the back end of last season. Dan, coming back to yourself, I know you're quite a big fan of Il Etait Temps, and you can, away from Cheltenham, he's got a near-on faultless record.
I just love him because he's almost a bit of an underdog, and you don't get many Willie Mullins horses who have won 4 Grade 1s over fences be an underdog. But he's only ever been a favourite over fences twice in his 8 starts, and one of those on chase debut, and the other was in the Clonmel Oil. You just don't tend to get that profile of horse. You think of Willie Mullins 2 mile chasers. You're generally thinking odds-on favourites where most of the time they go, but he's almost been defying expectations. He's not the biggest of horses. He's probably, I think, arguably lacks a bit of scope. But what he has managed to do since his earlier days is improve his jumping technique and also settle a lot better. And when he was a juvenile hurdler, he was extremely keen, and that was always counting against him. But that run in the Celebration last season, fresh, I thought that was a clear career best, and maybe the best 2 mile chase performance of the season. Now, I think some people are always going to crab it because it's end of season form, and there are always going to be caveats with those sort of the end of April versus, say, a March, where maybe some horses are over the edge. But to beat Jonbon that easily at his home track effectively, that impressively, and you take Il Etait Temps out, the form behind just makes a lot of sense. You'd have had Jonbon beat Energumene 9.5 lengths, Edwardstone another 2 lengths behind, a pretty similar distance, if not a bit further than usual to what Jonbon beats Edwardstone. So the forming behind just makes sense, whereas I understand most of the time, end of the season, it wouldn't. And the way he went through that race was a horse who clearly is now a very effective 2 mile chaser. Now, he's obviously now odds on, which he deserves to be. And if he can replicate that performance we saw last time, then he's going to be extremely difficult to beat. I'd argue that potentially there's an element that if he had maybe like the flashier profile, like a horse like a Chacun Pour Soir coming over, he might even be slightly shorter. I still think there's an element of it's only Il Etait Temps until potentially he goes and proves it yet again.
Yeah, it was a fantastic performance to beat Jonbon. Mark, with Jonbon, is it remiss of us to be thinking that he's kind of slightly over the hill now? Or, is this a race, given his usual Sandown record, he could bounce back in?
I actually think he's been fairly underestimated price-wise here. Il Etait Temps, for me, end of season form, you always approach it with a little bit of caution. And I'd approach with a big dollop of caution when you see Jonbon coming towards the end of his season. And Energumene, I don't think he's the horse he was. For all that he's still a fantastic campaigner there. I didn't rate the Celebration form outstandingly high, given their context. For all the visually, it was impressive. And he's a likeable horse in general. But I think at the prices, he's factored in as if he's, gone and been the senior established chaser for a number of years. Like Jonbon is coming here, he's seeking a hat-trick in the race, and you're dealing with Cheltenham. I know it's a variable at different times of year compared to the festival. It can be fine for him, but I look at Jonbon's top race and post ratings, and I think 3 of his top 5 have all come at Sandown. This is where you see a very, very good version of Jonbon. It's the second run after a wind-up. I don't like the fact they had to go down that route, but Nicky Henderson does do it. It wouldn't view it as much of a negative as maybe other stables doing it. Sometimes second run can be better for him. Ground as well, I think a bit of better ground is going to be a big difference to him compared to what he faced in the Schlur. Look, I didn't think coming off the back of the Schlur lads, I'd be standing here going back Jonbon and Tingle Creek. But at 9-2 in a race where you could even back him each way at 9-2 in 2 places, I just think he's been a bit disrespected off the back of a run like he's had. And Il Etait Temps has probably caught him at a very opportune time last season. I'm not saying Il Etait Temps can't go and do it, but at the price you're looking at, I just feel it's a little bit of disrespect for a horse that has been there and done it on so many levels. We won't get into this all-time great chat and have us all falling out for the afternoon. But I do think just in the context of this race, at a track where you know he is rock solid typically, yeah, I think he's each way value at 9-2, but I think he's back him straight at 9-2 myself.
If you're like Mark Boylan and you fancy Jonbon for the race, you can get a price boost of 5-1. Terms and conditions do apply. Max bet is 25 quid on all singles, but you can get 5-1, about a 4-1 shot. Jonbon 5-1 for the Tingle Creek. And if you don't like Jonbon, you like Lotus Sud for the race, you think he might be a good price at 2-1, you can get a standout 5-2 as a bet boost with BOYLE Sports. 5-2 is the price boost. You can get that again, 25 quid a single with BOYLE Sports. Make sure to click the link in the description down below to get involved. Gavin, your thoughts on the Tingle Creek? Interesting race.
I'd be against Jonbon. How are you, Mark?
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Gavin.
Okay, he's £3 better off Lotus Sud and he preferred the ground, but people say it's his home track. But like Il Etait Temps and Lotus Sud have won at Sandown as well. Lotus Sud won the King Henry VIII last year. The slight negative for Lotus Sud is that, to me, he seems much better when he's fresh, and also when he gets bottomless ground. He's as good a jumper as there is in Britain or Ireland. I hope, in terms of his champion chase run, that this is his last run before March, because if he goes to the champion chase and gets his ground conditions, he'd have an each way squeak for sure. I'd be against Jonbon just because, like, for example, 10 of the last 12 winners are aged between 6 and 8, and he's 9 turning 10, same as the 3 outsiders in the race. So I think Il Etait Temps, as Dan said, when he started out first, he was a very scratchy jumper of a hurdle. He was a scratchy jumper of a fence. But in the celebration chase last year, his jumping was fantastic. I seen the program the other day about the closing of the trainer's title. It was very, very good. And I got to see the race again. And geez, I couldn't believe his jumping was so good. So if he jumps as well as that, Jonbon's jumping has gone to pot a few times. He does like Sandown. Just the fact that he's 9 turning 10, well beat the last day. If I got 4-5 or 8-11 Il Etait Temps, I'd say that'd be tempting.
Yeah, he certainly looks like he's the standard setter going into the race, and it'll be interesting to see Lotus Sud, considering, as they went from Cheltenham to win at this meeting last year, whether be able to back that up in open Grade 1 company. There is also some very good handicaps on the card, as we discussed earlier, and we're going to take a look at the London National, which is typically competitive over the staying 3.5 miles, but the ground here is going to play a big part in things. Mark, you were mentioning it a little bit earlier about how much rain we're going to get. Currently forecasted good ground, which obviously for these types of staying handicaps, and especially for a horse like Tanganyika, who's right at the top of the market, he wouldn't, as plenty of Venetias, wouldn't mind a little bit of digging the ground. Yeah,
and Venetias, look at it, it's the time of year that they need to start kicking into gear. It is a window where we can see them turn, but up to this point, it can be relatively quiet. No, she had a couple of winners in the last fortnight, but I think that wheel will turn as the season goes on. And Andrew, we were talking with Dan before we came on air here about the schedule, I suppose, of staying handicap chases. There's a few of these at multiple entries, and a work in progress is one of them in the London National here, because he's been a horse that I think if you had him in Ireland and you go in a sequence like this, albeit he's never won by big margins, but for this horse to be going and winning 6 on the bounce and to still be kind of only barely climbing up, I think he got £4 for his win the other day at Uttoxeter. He could still be fairly well treated, but he's also winning the Welsh National Trial, I believe, as well. That's at Chepstow on Saturday, 1:36. So look, wherever he goes is going to be interesting. But ground-wise, it would be quicker, I'd say, than he'd ideally want. I just thought the way that the Skeletons have approached this season, it feels like there's been a kind of a strong focus on getting some of these decent handicaps on the board early. This is a £50,000 race in its own right. I thought Gallia de l'Etot, she can cope with a bit of better ground. This type of race, I just feel it could be the shape that you could see an early season target. Had a run at Carlisle, does need to improve from it, but it was the first start since running the Midlands National. I don't get the impression that was D-Day just from the way it unfolded, and it wouldn't shock me if this race cut up a bit from entry stage and she ended up in the one. But it is a race that I would be reserving full judgment until you get a look at the fields, given we have so many options for these chasers around this window.
Yeah, it's a very, very difficult sometimes to pen down at this stage of the week, but we will try our best to. Dan, I'm intrigued by I've mentioned it to you a couple of times over the last few weeks about Joel Parkinson and Sue Smith's yard, who have had an awful lot of well-backed horses in recent weeks and are operating at a pretty decent strike rate at that. They have O'Connell in here, who's a winner at Sandown before, and a pretty decent prep run for this at Carlisle just a couple of weeks ago. So you'd like to think that a horse like him would have a decent chance there.
Yeah, it's some sort of turnaround from their usual MO, because normally that yard, very slow to get going. You don't normally see the best of them until December, January time. I think last November they didn't have a winner all month, and I think they've had a dozen or so as it stands. So clearly ahead of where they usually are. Obviously, he was very progressive sort of back into last season. He was good second in the Ida, where never really getting to Knockamore, but it was a bit of a strange race. And a fair reappearance at Carlisle recently. So he could still have a bit more to come over fences, for all that he did go up quite a lot for his trio of wins last season. I did think Tanganyika was probably the one to beat. I still think there's plenty of upside with him still. And for all that, yes, you associate Venetia with heavier ground, a lot of his wins have come on good to soft. And I think we're going to get a little bit of rain around. Obviously, we know it's going to be slightly quicker on the chase course as it normally is. I think he'll handle the conditions absolutely fine. Like many of the yards, shaped like he'd need the run when he was behind Marble Sands when last seen. But he's also got that assured stamina for a real marathon trip, like we saw when he was second in the Midlands National to Mr. Vango, and the pair pulled a mile clear that day and only 6 starts over the fences. So I thought he was probably the likely favourite for me. And just one to keep an eye on down the weights really is Rivers Corner. Now he's another horse who wants properly deep ground, and he has other potential assignments as well. But only rated 118. His chase form so far has a real solid look to it. His reappearance last time in Exeter over 2 mile 4 shaped far better than probably he should have done under the circumstances. He's one I'm just looking to keep on side with a view to these kind of regional nationals, particularly when the ground gets really deep. Because you look at his hurdles form, it's all about heavy ground. But the litmus test, I guess the caveat with this race is, like Mark mentioned, I think there's 6 or 7 different marathon chases from Friday to Sunday in Britain. And baffling race planning as usual.
Well, we won't go down that rabbit hole, Dan, because we really could be here.
Oh, I'd be here all day.
Yeah,
Dare me.
We'll start talking about novice handicaps before we know it. Gavin, very open handicap chase this, but did you have a fancy?
No strong opinion. I thought the 2 6-year-olds were interesting. Younger horses, quite unexposed. Mark mentioned a work in progress who's won his last 47 races, but still gets in off 125. So that's good. He'd have a squeak if he goes here. The other one is Ask Brewster, 6-year-old. He's 4 from 8 over fences, won his last 3, won on his reappearance in October, and he's up £8 for that to 129. Definitely stayed the trip, and if they don't get too much rain, it'll definitely suit Ask Brewster. So trappy race, but maybe him.
Before we get on to Navan, we were delighted to get a few opinions from Don McLean with some of his best bets and selections for this weekend.
Hi, Andrew. Hi, lads. Yeah, what another fantastic weekend's National Hunt Racing in store, featuring as it does the Tingle Creek Chase at Sandown and the Hilly Chase at Cork, and good card at Navan as well on Saturday. So yeah, hell of a weekend in store. Again, we're getting used to this. The last couple of weeks have been just fantastic National Hunt Racing, and the Tingle Creek Chase, yeah, the Betfair Tingle Creek Chase on Saturday sees Lotus Sud and Jonbon reopposing, having met in the Slur Chase. Of course, Lotus Sud was a really good winner that day. Came home 15 lengths clear of Jonbon. I wouldn't be surprised if Jonbon reversed placings with Lotus Sud. We know that Nicky Henderson said early in the season that the Tingle Creek Chase was his early season target. I'm sure he would have taken the Slur Chase along the way as well, but it wouldn't be surprising if Jonbon progressed from his Slur Chase run. We know that he's very good at Sandown as well, probably better at Sandown than he is at Cheltenham. And Lotus Sud was very good in beating him. He was obviously one of the best novice chasers around last season, and was good in winning the Slur Chase. But just think that Jonbon maybe could improve a little bit more from his run in the Slur Chase than Lotus Sud will. So, and back at Sandown as well. I just think Jonbon has a chance of reversing placings with Lotus Sud. That said, I think they're both going to have to improve on their Slur Chase run quite a bit if they're going to get the better of Il Etait Temps. Il Etait Temps, very talented horse, as we know. He was really good in winning the Celebration Chase at Sandown last April when he was running for the first time in almost a year. And I think Willie Mullins was going over just to hopefully pick up some of the prize money from the race. In the end, he picked up all of it, and he was very good. Il Etait Temps got the better of Jonbon, stayed on well, proved that he could handle Sandown, proved that he could operate over the minimum trip at Sandown on good ground. He does set a high standard. He has had a run this season as well. He ran in the Clonmel Oil Chase over 2 miles and 5. He was good in winning that day. I think that Il Etait Temps is the right favourite in the race, and maybe Jonbon to get the better of Lola Sud for the runner-up spot behind him. Then the Henry VIII chase, the bet for Henry VIII chase, that sees the return of Lulamba, and yeah, it's going to be great to see him again. He was obviously one of the best juvenile hurdlers last season. He only went down by a neck to Poneros in the Triumph Hurdle, and then came back over here to Punchestown and was impressive in winning the champion 4-year-old hurdle, beating Poneros that day. And his chasing debut, I thought, was good. His jumping was good. There were 4 of the fences omitted in that Exeter race, but he jumped well and he kept on well. I think Alnilam maybe could be the one to give him most to do. Ollie Murphy's horse, he was good the last day at Cheltenham, having beaten Country Mile at Uttoxeter in his chasing value. He went to Cheltenham last time, and he was good again in winning a novice's chase there, getting the better of relieved with duties. He was forward from early. He got the better of Centara, and then had enough in reserve to see off relieved of duties. Gordon Elliott's horse, who was beaten next time, but I think there could be more to come from relieved of duties. I'm not sure that run in the Craddock Stand chase was his true running, so I thought it was a good performance by Alney Lamb to beat him by as much as he did, and maybe Alney Lamb could be the one to put it up to Lulamba in the Henry VIII chase. The London National over the other extreme in terms of distance, over 3 miles 4.5. I think O'Connell is an interesting horse in here. He's the horse who stays really well and has proven at Sandown, and his only run at Sandown, he won a 3 mile handicap chase there last February when he stayed on really well. He was given a really nice ride by Gavin Sheehan. He had him in behind from early. He only really started making his ground after the railway fences around to the pond fence, and then from the top of the home straight he stayed on really strongly over the last 2 fences, got up and won well. That was on heavy ground as well, so he handled those conditions well, but he's good on better ground as well. He came back to Newcastle then for the Eider chase, and the Eider chase, obviously it's over an extreme trip, 4 miles 1.5 furlongs, and he ran well. He finished second, and maybe just the final kind of, maybe from the second last home, that maybe found him out. That extreme trip maybe just stretched his stamina a little bit. He finished second in the end behind Knockanor. He was beaten 16 lengths by Knockanor, and maybe if Egbert had stood up at the final fence, he might have got the better of him for the runner-up spot. But it was a good run this year. Of course, he's rated higher than he was then, but there's a good chance he'll come forward from that race again. And it wouldn't be surprising if Connections have had this race in mind for him as his early season target, as in if the race at Carlisle the last day will bring him forward for this race, given that he's proven at Sandown, and this kind of 3.5 mile trip at Sandown, that should be a good trip for him at a track at which he has proven. So Gavin Sheehan looks like he's going to be back on board. So I think O'Connell maybe could be a horse who could go well at that London National over the marathon trip. The Fox Rock Handicap, I think Harry Desangre could go well here. And if they all line up, he could be a little bit of a price. Henry de Bromhead's horse, he's making a seasonal debut, but he's a horse who goes really well on soft ground. He was very good in winning his beginner's chase at Goran Park last February on Red Mills Trial Hurdle Day, when he really relished the conditions and he stayed on strongly to get the better of Lambron and Blizzard of Oz. Like that form is working out really well. Lambron went to Clonmel next time and beat Western Fold to win his beginner's chase. Then he went to Sandown and finished second in the Bet365 Gold Cup behind Resplendent Grey. He was only beaten a length. He raced off a mark of 142 then. He's now rated 147, and so he added ballast to that Goran Park run, as did Blizzard of Oz, who went to Punchestown next time and was only just beaten in that listed novices handicap chase. It can be a really good pointer to the future. It's a horse, or it's a race that's been won by some talented horses in the past. Assyrian Forlange won it, Kemboy won it, and then he went to Limerick on his penultimate run last season, Harry Desangre, and finished second behind Fun in the Hugh McMahon chase. That's a grade 3 race, so it was a good run by him. Fun's a really talented mare. A stiff 2.5 miles at Navan on softer heavy ground, that should be pretty much close to optimum for Harry Desangre, and yeah, he could give some of his better fancied rivals in the race a little bit of a race, so he's interesting in there. Then there's the Hillyway Chase at Cork on Sunday, the Bar 1 betting Hillyway Chase, and yeah, this could be a cracker. I found a 50 at Majborough lineup, found a 50, has got race fitness on his side, and Majborough was one of the top 2 mile novice chases of last season. He was unlucky to make that bad mistake at the second last fence in the Arkle. Then he came back to Punchestown and was impressive in winning the Barberstown Castle chase, the Grade 1 novices chase there over 2 miles. So it's going to be really exciting to see him now stepping into open company. Found a 50 was good the last day when he won at Navan, won the Fortria chase. That was a good performance by him, and he's got that race fitness on his side. and he was obviously dropping back down in trip that day from running in the champion chase at Dan Royal over 3 miles. So it's going to be, if they both line up along with Energumen, then this could be a hell of a race. But I'll have an eye on Banbridge as well. He ran in the Hilly chase last year. He was giving Energumen a real race when he unseated at the final fence. He was giving Energumen £10 that day as well. As we know, Banbridge went on then and won the King George at Kempton. But for him to run as big a race as he did in the Hilly chase over a trip that was almost certain, well, that was too sharp for him. That was a big run, and it was obviously it augured well for the future for his King George bid. He had a run last season before he ran in the Hilly chase. He ran in the Fortria chase. He was well beaten in that, but then he went on to the Hilly chase and then the King George. This year he's making his debut, all going well in the Hilly chase. But Joseph O'Brien has earmarked this race as his seasonal return for a little while, so it's going to be really interesting to see how he fares, and just kind of hope that he will run well, and that will set him up nicely for a tilt at the King George again at Kempton in his effort to win back-to-back renewals of the King George. But that's just one race in what is another really deep national hunt racing weekend. Lots of questions will be answered again over the course of this weekend, so hope you enjoy it.
We also have some good action from Navan and Cork this weekend, which we'll be having a quick look at. There's a listed action and Grade 2 action at Navan, a nice novice hurdle there over 2.5 miles, and a listed handicap over 3 miles. Mark, must say, going through this 3 mile, 1 furlong handicap hurdle, there's some familiar names, some for good reasons, some maybe for questionable reasons over the years, but it looks like it will take an interesting shape to it and be a decent enough size field as well.
Yeah, there's a few regulars knocking around here. I actually thought Jonbon could be interested in here, having a first start for Ian Donoghue. He blossomed here at 66-1, but I see he's been declared for a veterans chase at Haydock on Wednesday, so I'd imagine that's the first port of call. But Ian, he has hit the Hayson going to Haydock as well. I think he's only got a pound higher in Britain and Ireland over fences, so I'll keep an eye on him, and obviously a yard that's going places. But like Buddy One towards the top on his recent form, I find it hard to totally row in behind him off 150 here. Staffordshire not a second in the handicap here, but he's obviously won a Thurles Clonmel, I should say, midweek. So you'd imagine it have to be unlikely you get to see him turn the dice around and go again. But it's a sort of race you'd love a kind of an unexposed type coming into it. I thought Paddy's Milestone was an impressive winner, went very well back to the Navan Racing Festival for Stuart Crawford. One thing I would bear in mind, though, if you look at that and say that he was off a year, maybe there's lots of improvement to come. I did speak to Stuart after that, and he made the point that they had him pretty sharp and pretty ready. They had him for a couple of away days, and maybe if you're looking at it typically and thinking there'll be a lot of improvement to come, I'm not saying there can't be, but don't maybe just expect the same level of it to jump up. I thought the one there that was second to him, Grimo from Gordon Elliott's yard, given how the stable have been absolutely firing at the moment, he's low mileage. Look, I'd like to see him maybe going and maybe we just bumped into one the last day. I thought he could have been a bit more resolute, but in this type of race where I think they're going to go steady, some will fall away. I think if you can stay hanging on to him for as long as possible, he mightn't be the most exposed of these as a hurdler. So I'll maybe take, at this point, a tentative look at Grimo, but it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of ends up shaking here, because for €100,000, lads, like, it's a sort of race that if Dan Skelton wasn't eyeing up a British Trainers Championship, he could fire something very, very attractive in here another year. So I won't be giving him ideas. He doesn't need any advice from here to come over and raid us, but maybe Grimo could be a bit of value possibly.
Yeah, Gavin, interesting with Gordon having 6 of the 18 entries at this stage. You won't run all 6, obviously, but I'm sure he'll throw a couple of darts at this, and that may be the answer in terms of he's got Grimo. Gringo Dobrell was relatively eye-catching the last day, over 2.5 as well.
Yeah, I'd imagine Jack will probably write Grimo. As you say, Paddy's Milestone had been off a year. The fact that he had done a lot of work might actually be an advantage, because then he mightn't bounce as much. The way when a horse off for a year, sometimes they can run poorly. So if he was quite fit, that might help him. But that was only 20 days ago. And surprisingly, he only got a £7 penalty, because in Ireland, normally you get a bigger penalty for winning. Buchel booked number 3 on the card at the minute for Ted Walsh. He's an interesting horse, pulled off a nice touch at Fairyhouse the last time we seen him. And just in the previous race, the 2.5 mile novice hurdle, without getting you too excited, Andrew, the Devon, for Paul Nolan, the form got some boost to the weekend with Skylight Hustle and the Passing Wife, one winning very, very easily and the other running a cracker in the Royal Bonds. So the form of that is very good. I think the step up and trip to 2.5 will really suit him, as he showed previously in bumpers, because even the day when he did win in Gorham Park, it took him a long time to get there. So I think the step up and trip will really suit. But yeah, Navan, quite a decent card.
Yeah, it is. Dan, I suppose you've unfortunately been on the receiving end of me crying wolf an awful lot of the time when it comes to these Paul Nolan novice hurdlers, but he did it very nicely. And as Gavin said, between Skylight Hustle and the passing wife, who was the eye catcher of all eye catchers in the Royal Bond, that looks pretty robust form at this stage.
Yeah, all I know is whenever there's a form boost for the double you know, you seem to seemingly mysteriously are always in a taxi. Can you tell me who this horse finished behind last time? And Lord Bolt is a Paul Nolan trained novice hurdler, and this has been going on for years and years. It never ends well, but in this case, you actually might have a good one this time, which is really worrying, especially for my sanity of having to put up with the propaganda. But yeah, I will be eagerly awaiting. I won't even need to watch the race. I'll just have my phone next to me. And as soon as it's about 5 minutes after post time, if it starts vibrating off the hook, I know it's been a successful day. But yeah, there's a few interesting ones at Navan for the weekend. In that handicap, I thought maybe Aiko would be another interesting one for Stuart Crawford, who, like Gordon Elliott's got a few in there. Obviously, he looked pretty good in bumpers and slow to really develop over hurdles, but rounded off the season with a good third at Fairy House up 122. Stayed on really well that day, and this slightly more extended trip I think will suit. Custom Taylor won that day. I think he was initially in here, but not anymore. He would be £12 better off with him now. But he's also entered over fences a couple of times in the UK. So the Stuart Crawford team have a few decisions to make there. But you feel with that prize on offer, this looks a really winnable race. So it wouldn't surprise me if both Stuart Crawford and Gordon Elliott throw a few darts at it.
We get to the final bit of our programme, which is the 60-second selections. Understand completely we're still in the middle part of the week, so difficult at times to row down on selections. But that's never stopped Mark Boylan from finding something for me, especially the worse the race, the more chance Mark has of putting it up.
We're just waiting for another Christmas Clashlight collaborative again last Christmas, Andrew. That was amazing. I think it was our four of us, all the blind ones.
Yeah, the next episode of this program, I'm sure will be the Christmas preview, where I'll be coming on with my Oliver McKiernan hat, saying that there's something down in Limerick, and you've gone, no, I've got a Rick against it.
I won't say it's like should be behind a paywall or an OnlyFans type of job, but that's so dark, those horses. I think now there needs to be some consideration for the public when you're putting them up now, Andrew. Just be careful now this Christmas. But we're all trying to have a nice festive season. But look, I'll throw a few in the mix for this weekend. Probably going to be short in the Academy Hurdle at Navan on Saturday, but Ritz Plan second to Highland Crystal at Punchestown first time up. And I actually thought on the day it never would have beat Highland Crystal, but the way the race unfolded, it was nowhere near as smooth for Ritz Plan as it was for the winner. Beaten well, but pulled clear of the third. Got a nice pedigree as well. She's by Shaman, which you wouldn't always think is hurdling potential, but she's a half to Bayan, who was second in a Galway hurdle, third in a Coral Cup, won a Ladbroke hurdle. I think she'll make a nice hurdler for a team that know what they're doing in that division. Colin Cannon as well. He's entered in a maiden hurdle at Navan on Saturday too. And I thought on the day I was a little bit disappointed to get beaten by Cocktail Brew, because I think Noel Meade can often have them pretty ready early in the season, but maybe time is going to prove that was a tough task taking on Cocktail Brew, given he's gone and franked the form since. And also at Navan on Saturday, I give a mention to one that has to bounce back from a poor run last time, but what felt like a pipe opener. It's Grandero Bello in the Foxrock handicap chase, that listed chase. It's worth a few quid. And I know Gavin gave a mention to Buchel Bucht in the handicap hurdle. He's also in the handicap chase as well, I should say, and we'll have a chance. But just thought Grandero Bello, he's down to 140 now. They experimented with different trips with him, tried him in a Hennessy or a Coral Gold Cup, and it didn't quite work for him. But I think if all falls right and it feels like a plan, stable, having a really good year, Eddie Harty team, and Patrick on the dices too, I think he can run well. If the devil, I'd like to throw him into the mix too on Saturday as well. But the You OK to Drive Syndicate, I assume you were part of that after your shenanigans last night, and there was a question asked to you. But I think he'd run very well too. For all that we don't know what will take him on from the Elliott team, I think he's form everywhere. You look back through his bumper run, the whole shebang. I think he's very promising indeed. So there's a few for me for the weekend, but I'd imagine Ritz Plan and Col Cannon, they'll be the two that might try and double up depending on what the fields look like.
Gavin, what do you have for this weekend?
Unlike Mark, I'll try and keep it to a minute. In the 12:31 in Cork on Sunday, there's a very interesting horse called West of Bally. We don't have a handicap rating from him yet. Very much an eye catcher. Galway bolted up in a bad race since. If he gets into this less than 110 for Eric McNamara, they have a chance. In the 105, the nightclub that Andrew was in last night, Copacabana, might do the job. Obviously, he'd be favoured for Willie, but a very good bumper horse last season. The Mayor's Novice Chase, Cala Conti would be favoured. Break My Soul just might give her plenty to think about in that one down in Cork. There's a 3 mile novice hurdle, Classical Creek, was very, very good in Navan. and the step up and trip should suit. And I'm hoping that Majborough will win the Hilly Way simply because I backed it to win the Champion Chase a while ago. Fingers crossed. Even though he does jump a dot to his left going right-handed, I still will be hopeful that he can beat Founder 50 in Banbridge.
Dan, what do you like this weekend?
A few on Saturday. So the 130 Aintree, the Kaluki Kid, is currently jocked up. He's also in the December Gold Cup, but seemingly looks like they might be going here. A progressive chaser last season. Found the manifesto a bit too much when last seen at the back end of the season, but shaped well in the Colin Parker on reappearance. I think he's very capable of winning a handicap like this. The 211 at Chepstow's, a 3 mile novice handicap chase, and Sole Solution is currently jocked up to make his chase debut for Venetia. Expecting pretty testing ground at Chepstow. I think there's plenty of rain forecast, and he just looks a proper staying chaser type who just showed a very good attitude over hurdles. And the 225 at Sandown, a 2 mile handicap hurdle that Knickerbocker Glory won last year, a well-backed 13-8 favourite. He's in at 4-1 there. This just looks to be his kind of ideal setup. Brilliant fresh, loves Sandown. He is £6 higher than last year, but to me, he's a conditions horse. The horse who just needs to have everything kind of fall his way. He'll go from the front and be very hard to catch. And any rain that does come will be a positive. And obviously, we know the hurdles course at Sandown is always a bit softer than the chase track.
Yeah, nice little bit of selections from different tracks for the guys. It's been a pleasure to have Dan, Mark and Gavin on, as always, and great to hear from Don McLean at the halfway part of the programme as well. Make sure to get involved in all the BOYLE Sports offers mentioned throughout the show, all those super boosts and signing up offers, plenty to get stuck into. Another fantastic weekend of racing. We really hope you have enjoyed On The Wire. If you have done so, please like and subscribe to the Racing TV channel down below, and we'll see you again very soon for our Christmas preview.
BOYLE Sports.